I've come back to Hampshire to drive this, which is a Rover 220 GSI that belongs to my friend Ben, who you might recall from a previous video also has a Volvo 480, and it's one of my favourite Rovers ever, and I'm going to show you why. This is partly a review and partly a test drive, because this particular Rover 220 GSI is actually for sale, and I'm very tempted. I drove one of this exact model when they were new and I was 20-something, and I was very taken with it. Does it still stand up 25 years and 78 cars later, or was I just impressionable and easily pleased? The 3-door 220 GSI is the perfect R8 for me. They're super rare, with about 13 left on the road, and especially so in this condition, but I already have way too many cars. Will I buy it? Should I buy it? Will you buy it instead, while I'm making my mind up? The 1989 Rover 200, codenamed R8, was the latest product of Rover's partnership with Honda. By the time the R8 came along, the Honda and Rover engineers had figured out each other's strengths and quirks and formed a proper partnership, with around 30 British designers and engineers based in Japan working elbow to elbow with their Honda colleagues throughout the car's development. The cabin here is I think it's a mix between Honda and Rover. The sort of low dash and that sweep. That's a Honda Q, but it's also a Rover Q. If I think back to the P6, that had that smooth curve. But Honda's also, if I go back to the Rover 200 generation before this, and even my Accord, although that's more sloping, had that kind of view. And the low scuttle is definitely a Honda styling thing. The steering wheel's great. I mean, it's quite small, very chunky, got these really good grips. It is an airbag wheel, but a sort of compact Euro bag rather than a sort of big, ugly, bulky thing. The interior styling was largely Rover-led, but I think, like a lot of it was very much a joint effort.
It was. Every aspect of the car was worked on by engineers from both teams. One country taking the lead on a certain aspect, while another taking the lead on the other, but at no point was it just one country doing the work.
Yeah. Let's start it up. So far so good, and Ben's not giving me the hard sell, but I'm not sure he necessarily has to. Straight away I'm liking the driving position, even before we get out on the open road. The low scuttle gives you such a commanding view, and you're held in really nicely by the seat, and it's got a really good feeling of solidity as well, even though it's, what's this, 1995, so 25-year-old, 1994, over 25 years old. Really doesn't feel like an old car, not to me anyway. I suppose I am used to old cars, but this doesn't feel like one of them. Forget everything you know about how the Rover story ended for a moment and put yourself back in 1989 when Rover launched this car. The Ford Escort and Vauxhall Astra Opel Kadett that were the biggest sellers in the class were looking distinctly like last month's creme fraiche by now. Volkswagen's Golf was similarly ageing, albeit more gracefully thanks to some very clever advertising by Bose Massimi Pollitt and a reputation for being better nailed together than the competition, which had some justification in those days. The British-built Peugeot 309, the Renault 19 and the Fiat Tipo were all newer and had their merits, but none was particularly premium, leaving aside the more sporting variants, and others like the Citroën BX and Alfa 33 were just a bit niche, like watching Channel 4 or voting for the SDP. Volvo, Nissan, Toyota and some other Japanese outfits did do family hatchbacks too, but not if you still had any of your own teeth and hair. Into this competitive landscape, the Rover 200 landed well. The motoring press rated it highly, even those like Car Magazine, who had given Rover's previous new car, the 800, a rather mixed review. It offered technologically advanced 16-valve fuel-injected engines, a well-sorted chassis, decent space, and premium looks both inside and out. What Car named it Car of the Year for 1990. Rover's Maestro and Montego, formerly badged as Austins, had done reasonably well in this sector for a while, at least in the UK, but had aged quickly and were looking tired. They soldiered on in budget versions, meaning there was no denuded tin bumper poverty spec Rover 200 to lower the tone. It was a smart marketing strategy that began to pitch the company nicely into a premium position that allowed bigger margins at still healthy volumes. It sold strongly, number 9 in the UK in 1989, number 7 in 1990 and number 6 in 1991, in spite of bold premium pricing. It sold pretty well into the rest of Europe too. Rover was doing very well. This road surface is pretty dreadful. It's very broken, cheap stones over tarmac, and you can feel that through the suspension, but it's not horrible. It's not rattling your fillings. For a performance car, I think it's absorbing the bumps pretty well.
It feels a little unrefined at times. However, once you get in the bends and you feel the way the suspension works, the ride is actually really rather good, as you say, for a hot hatch. This is very good.
I'm not throwing this around too much out of deference to the fact that it's your car, not mine, and also the fact that I've only just got in it. So I'm not going to explore the handling too much. But going through those S-bends really does feel like that it's got a lot more to give than I'm taking. Well, we were doing a bit under the limit there, in deference to it being bends, but it was eager to go. It's tempting you to give it a bit more play. So I was just exploring the things.
Oh no, go ahead, enjoy yourself.
It is quite a narrow peak of power.
It is.
You're right away, strictly. Never mind, we'll take it. Yeah, you can feel that the power is at the top end there. So there's enough torque low down for it to be able to keep up and feel capable. But it's only when you get up towards the upper ends of the rev range, about, I wasn't looking at the rev counter, but about 5,000 RPM I think, that it really starts to come alive, and that's where the real performance lives. I like the size of it, threading it through these. I mean, it's an A road, but it's quite a small A road. It feels the perfect size for this, because it's not too wide, it's big enough to not feel too roller skatey. Yeah, that's plenty fast enough.
Yeah. I like the gear change.
Yes, I like the gear change.
That's odd, because it's one of the worst gear changes I personally have ever encountered. Not that I've encountered that many.
Oh, I'm liking it. I'm immediately friends with the gear change. I'm finding it neat, precise, short enough throw. The risk of sounding like I'm a long way up myself. You can heel and toe in this car, even in my big boots.
Yeah.
The pedals are positioned really nicely for it. I like that gear change. What don't you like about the gear change?
I find the throw is, firstly the gear stick is quite wobbly, and when I try to engage a gear, sometimes it just doesn't quite go in.
I'm going to find reverse there now. Yeah, so it's a little bit notchy getting into first, you're right. See how at this point I'm giving out buying signals like a crazy man. I've even got Ben trying to persuade me the car has shortcomings. I'd like to claim it's cunning reverse psychology, but actually it's just that I'm a rubbish negotiator when it comes to cars on my bucket list.
Careful. Yeah. You do get wheel spin in this car, especially if you catch it on the wet.
Yeah.
I think that's just due to the fact that so much power is being driven through the front wheels.
Agreed, and I think the turbocharged version was notorious for it, wasn't it? And I think they limited the torque electronically to just 171 pound-foot, which is plenty for a car of this era. But I've not driven one of those, but I can well imagine that this for me would be the better all-round car. It doesn't have the same straight line performance, but the world is not full of straight lines, or at least our part of it isn't.
No, most definitely not.
If we think of it more as a gentleman racer than a boy racer,
yes,
you can drive it like a chauffeur. You can keep the revs low and it's very smooth, and the pickups there.
You can.
Or you can drive it like a race car, and depending on which mood you're in, you want to be, you drive it completely differently, but it offers both.
Yeah, it's a very unique take on the hot hatch formula. It's got British Racing green paint, it's got a walnut dash. It feels like a reimagining of what a British sports car is.
Yeah, I think that's right, and I think it has a nod to Honda's racing heritage in there as well, which is of course all about, well, originally bikes and high revving small engines. This 2 litre in car this size isn't a small engine even today, but the having to rev it to find the real heart of the performance is a Honda thing, of course. Not that it's a Honda engine. I mean, this is a T series, T16.
This is I think this is a T series by this time. The earlier engines were the M series, but someone will correct me on that, I'm sure. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, this will have been a T16. So, but the T series was a development of the M series, which
was the development of the K.
Well, no, the M series was a development of the O series from the Princess, the 1802 litre in the Princess, and that in itself was a development of the B series that goes back to the MGB and the Morris Oxford of the 1950s. So this can trace this block at least can trace its lineage back to 40 years before this car was new. But that's not a criticism. I think it shows how good Rover were at developing engines and making silk purses out of sow's ears, thanks to a long tradition of limited budgets and just hardcore roll your sleeves up engineering.
This was my first experience of a proper performance car. The Volvo is fun to drive, yet this is just something else completely.
I admire your restraint, because if I'd had one of these in my younger days, I would have had it in a hedge by now. I love that schizophrenic nature of it, that sort of split personality. If you can drive it lazily, you can shift early and just ride the torque and have an easy, quiet time and a civilized conversation. And we're not doing this, but it would be a fabulous thing to do on a track day, because you could really rev the nuts off it and throw it around like a proper hooligan and have just a real hoot in the same car. I really like it. I love how solid and well built it still feels.
It does. There are a few squeaks and rattles here and there, but it feels a quality car.
That combination of Rover knowing how to do chassis and inject a bit of character, combined with Honda's ability to productionize a car, and then the combination of the two working harmoniously together to complete what feels like, it doesn't feel like it was designed by a committee in different hemispheres. It feels very complete and of a piece. At the time that I'm editing this film together, I haven't bought the Rover from Ben so far. I'm hugely tempted though, as you can probably tell. The 3-door 220 GSI has long been my favourite Rover of all, alongside my V8 SD1, and it's every bit as lovely as I remember from driving my friend's company car back in the mid-90s. But last time I counted, I already had 15 cars, and that's way too many, and I ran out of indoor storage about 3 cars ago, so I'd have to sell something, like my Honda Aerodeck or my Jaguar XJS, to make room. So at this point, the Rover is still for sale. It's not perfect, it needs a spot of welding on the rear wheel arches where they all go, and there's a slight voltage drain somewhere, so you need to isolate the battery if you don't use it for a few days. None of that would put me off. It's in very good overall condition, especially inside, it runs perfectly, and it has pretty low mileage at 80 odd thousand. What do you think I should do? I'd be genuinely interested in your thoughts, so do please let me know in the comments. On the other hand, if you want to buy it yourself, feel free to put your hand up and I'll pass you along to Ben. And if and when there's an online listing, I'll post it in the description below. I mean, I could buy the car off you, but it's the divorce I couldn't afford.
Yeah.